Hello everybody, we're just going to wait a couple of minutes here before we get started on our presentation about Isaac Perry. So just hang with us if you just joined in. We'll get started shortly. If you're just joining us, we'll just going to wait another minute or so, and we'll get started in just a couple minutes. Just want to allow some time to have people join us. All right, well, I think we'll go ahead and get started, and we'll just allow others to jump in as they come in. Welcome again to the Phelps Mansion. My name is Joe, and we're set up a little differently today. We were having some lots of technical difficulties this morning here with my laptop and also some Wi-Fi issues. We got the Wi-Fi issues fixed, but I couldn't get my laptop to open my camera or share a screen, so I quickly set up the screen here in our ballroom with our projector so that we could at least do it this way. So I'm hoping the Wi-Fi issue is corrected and will stay with us. Since we've been closed, we announced our closure back around March 17th. We have been doing these programs on Saturdays as a way to continue to engage with audiences from all over the country. We've had people from North Carolina and Virginia and Texas, and lots of people here locally watching our videos every Saturday, and we're going to continue to do these for the foreseeable future, especially until we can get an all clear to reopen, but you know, that's, who knows when that's going to happen. So here we are. If you aren't familiar with Isaac Perry, Isaac Perry was the architect of the Phelps Mansion. I thought we're going to talk a little bit about him personally and his life, but before we do that, for anybody who's not from the area or maybe not familiar with some of his buildings, I put together a few photos of some pictures showing the buildings that Isaac had designed, at least the ones that are still standing. Isaac Perry's first building here in Binghamton was the New York State Inebriate Asylum. This building was under construction around 1858. was completely finished around 1864, and it served as the very first inebriate asylum in the country. It still stands here in Binghamton today. It's been closed since 1993, but they're working to try and figure out what other uses this building might be able to serve. So hopefully they'll figure something out. It's on the National Registry of Historic Landmarks. So it's quite a unique building. The towers that you see used to rise a little bit higher, but they were chopped down because they were crumbling. We'll talk a little bit more about the inebriate asylum as we get into the presentation, but it's really this building that brings Isaac Perry to Binghamton, and then of course sets in motion the rest of his career for the rest of his life. Isaac Perry also designed several churches here in Binghamton. The one to the far left is Centenary Methodist, which was 1866. In the middle, I had to borrow these two pictures of First Congregational and St. Patrick's from Google Earth because I somehow or another did not have pictures of either one of these buildings. But First Congregational is on Main Street in Binghamton, and St. Patrick's Church on Leroy Street, all designed by Isaac Perry between 1866 and 1870. All beautiful buildings. All used to have steeples that went much higher, but a lot of the church steeples were taken down because they're too much to maintain and too much to keep up. So a lot of them went away. Of course, to the left we have what was the John Stuart Wells house. John Stuart Wells was a contractor builder here in Binghamton, worked very closely with Isaac Perry. Today the J.S. Wells house is known as the Parsons Funeral Home, but a beautiful, beautiful building. A lot of similarities between that house and our house, the Phelps Mansion, of course, which is on the right. That was a picture I took a few years ago. But it's pretty sunny out there today, so you get this pretty much a similar shot. We also have the Dwight block. This building was built over on Front Street as part of Dwightsville. I believe the idea was that this was going to be a hotel, but that idea didn't pan out, and eventually they became very high-end residences. In fact, this building was the birthplace of the Monday Afternoon Club, which was the ladies' club that would own this house, our mansion, from after 1905. But this is where the ladies' club started. Of course, this building's not here today. It was torn down to make way for a grocery store, and it stands about where the Broome County Health Department is today. We also have the Phelps Bank building to the left, which sadly is not here either. That building was torn down in 1929, but there's another bank building on the corner down on Court and Shenango that has a similar shape, but a little bit of a different architectural style. And then you have the 4th Broome County Courthouse to stand here in Binghamton. When the 3rd courthouse burned down, Isaac Perry was hired to design a new courthouse, and it's said that the courthouse, this one that you're looking at, actually stands on the foundation of the 3rd courthouse. They kept the foundation and then built a new building on top. But it's a beautiful building in downtown Binghamton with Lady Justice up top there. In 1876, Isaac Perry designs himself a new home here in Binghamton. It's a 4-story cast iron building. Today it's student housing with some commercial space on the 1st floor. But Isaac lived on the top floor of the building, and his architectural firm was on the 3rd floor of the building. And then the building to the right, yes, Jennifer, that is correct. The building to the right is today the town hall and village offices for the town of Oxford. But that's an Isaac Perry building. It's a very early, I shouldn't say early Isaac Perry building, but it's an Isaac Perry building that most people don't realize that it is an Isaac Perry building. It was built to be a bank originally, but like I said, today it's home to Oxford Town Hall and village offices. But it still stands today. That picture is also from Google Earth because I haven't been up to Oxford in a long, long time, so I wasn't able to get a picture of the building. So before we talk about Isaac Perry, I just want to let you know, obviously there's a lot to know about Isaac as far as his buildings go. Finding out about his personal life is a little bit more of a challenge. Roger Luther, our Broome County historian and director of the Preservation Association, has done a lot of research into Isaac Perry. He's got some beautiful photographs on his website, New York State Landmarks. I also was able to tour the Capitol building in Albany twice last year, and I purchased a book up there called The Capitol Story, and that has a great chapter about Isaac Perry that helps paint a little bit of a picture about who he was. And then there was also some research done by the Monday Afternoon Club and a gentleman named Wesley Haynes, who wrote a thesis for his schooling at Columbia University called Isaac Perry, Architect, Builder, and Craftsman. A lot of the information that I found about Isaac Perry dates to when he was working in the Capitol building, because almost every day in the newspaper there was some kind of article written about what Isaac Perry was up to. The Capitol building took a long, long time to build, and we'll talk a little bit more about the Capitol as we get into the program. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but Jennifer, the original Phelps Bank, there was a fire in 1908 on the top floor of the building, and then at some point, I don't know if it's just changing architectural styles or what, but the decision was made to tear the building down and replace it with the one that's down there today. So we have Isaac Perry, the man behind the buildings. Isaac was born on March 24th, 1822 in Binghamton, Vermont. His parents were Seneca and Martha Perry. Seneca Perry was a carpenter joiner and learned his trade as a shipwright during the War of 1812. In 1829, the Perrys moved to Keysville, New York, which is in Essex County. Keysville is about 4 hours from Binghamton. It's way up there, almost near the Vermont border. Very small town. At the time the Perrys were living there, it was believed that Keysville was going to become a booming, busy town. Their major industries were iron and lumber. But unfortunately, the railroads never made it through Keysville, which would be a deciding factor when Isaac Perry was a little bit older. That was one of the reasons why he left Keysville. He knew that in order to have more opportunity, he was going to have to go somewhere else. And of course, he ends up going to New York City. But at 10 years old, Isaac Perry begins apprenticing with his father. He was attending school in Keysville as well, but he did begin working with his father. And around 1847 or so, Seneca Perry and Son was a very well-established company. There are some advertisements listing the business in Keysville. The Perrys, they also dived into masonry work as well, but what they really were well known for, especially in Keysville, was the design of spiral staircases. I know this picture is a little small, but this is a picture of Rembrandt Hall, which is a residence up in Keysville. There is still a spiral staircase in it that's credited to the Perrys. This house was built for Emma Clara Peale Barton, who was the daughter of artist Rembrandt Peale. Rembrandt Peale, he's most well known for doing portraits of George Washington, but he has a lot of other beautiful paintings as well. I was looking up some last night, and they're really amazing. In 1848, Isaac Perry marries Lucretia L. Gibson. The Gibsons live next door, so literally he marries the girl next door. Around 1852, Isaac and Lucretia moved to New York City, and at this time, Isaac was working as a carpenter, and he was making about $1.50 a day. And this quote comes from one of the newspapers from 1887, talking about Isaac's early days in New York. It said he would walk 6 miles up and down Harlem to save car fare, but he would pay $5 to $10 to buy books on architecture. So Isaac is he moves to New York City with the idea that he eventually wants to become an architect and make better money than what he was making as a carpenter. These are photographs from the museum's collection. To the left side is Lucretia Perry, Isaac's wife. Lucretia and Isaac had several children. They all died in infancy. At some point, the Perrys adopt a young girl named Alice. The photograph to the right was in the Perry papers that we have here in the museum. There's no indication of who this girl is, but it's possible that this may be Alice when she was younger. Alice would grow up later in life and marry a gentleman named William Mosier and have a daughter named Lucretia. So now you have big Lucretia and little Lucretia. Little Lucretia ends up at some point moving in with Isaac and big Lucretia and grows up with them until around 1904 or so, and then she goes back to live with her mother. Why that happened is a mystery that we're still trying to figure out, but it's interesting nonetheless. Around 1854, Isaac Perry begins apprenticing with a New York City architect named Thomas R. Jackson. Now, Jackson had his own practice at this point, but early on, Jackson had learned architecture by apprenticing with Richard Upjohn. Richard Upjohn designed Trinity Church in New York City, and he also designed Christ Church here in Binghamton, amongst many other things. Richard Upjohn was a very well-known architect. In 1857, Isaac Perry was introduced to Joseph Edward Turner. Turner was the founder of the New York State Inebriate Asylum. Turner had this idea that they could treat alcoholism, and he wanted to have this new idea seen through, carried through, and so he sets in motion these plans. He kind of puts out a call for proposals, so to speak, and Isaac Perry was one of those people that submitted plans for the building. And eventually his was selected. It said that the board of the asylum was very hesitant to give the job to Isaac because Isaac really wasn't a well-known architect at this point. But the board basically told Mr. Turner, hey, if he makes any mistakes or something happens, it's your responsibility, not the board's. And Joseph Turner stood behind Isaac and went with his plans for what we saw there at the beginning, the castle-like structure that's here in Binghamton. In fact, there's a quote in one of the old newspapers that says that Perry once said that he actually drafted the plans for the asylum with the help of his wife, Lucretia. So you can really see that Isaac, still being inexperienced, he's asking his wife for help with the drawings and the plans for this big building here in the area. After completion of the asylum, which again was around 1864, Isaac Perry begins working on several churches and commercial buildings. So between 1864 and 1870, he's really going kind of full force with those kinds of buildings. He was still living in New York City at the time. He was kind of back and forth between New York and Binghamton, so he was kind of traveling quite a bit. But he did eventually have a practice here. There's a small building downtown that he started his firm in before eventually moving to the Perry Building in 1876. So around 1868, 1869, when Isaac Perry begins finishing up a lot of those projects, he is approached by Sherman Phelps. Sherman Phelps was one of, if not the wealthiest man in town. And he admired Isaac Perry and commissioned Isaac to design a new residence for the Phelps family, which of course is the mansion that we have here today. After this time, Isaac's reputation really takes off. He begins working on many projects in Binghamton, Elmira, Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. He also, I found some references that he did some work in Kansas too, but the information was very sparse and didn't really lead anywhere. But he was kind of all over the place. And by 1872, with all of this work that Isaac Perry is doing here in the area, he moves his practice officially to Binghamton at that time. Now in 1882, while Isaac is hard at work, he receives a telegram from Governor Grover Cleveland asking him to come to Albany. And of course, Isaac Perry has no idea what Governor Grover Cleveland would possibly want with him. The Capitol building had begun construction around 1867. During this time, it had gone through several different governors, several different architects. There was a lot of political things happening behind the scene at the Capitol building, and so it was a very challenging time. And Cleveland was looking for someone to finish the job. Now, Isaac Perry was about 60 years old at this point, but Cleveland believed that Perry was the best candidate for the job because Perry could deal with many different people and still be effective at the same time. Isaac Perry was a very unassuming man. He was very well mannered, very well respected, very honest, very hardworking man. There's a quote in the paper around this time describing Isaac Perry as a brawny, big-statured man with a flowing white beard, and the niceties of personal appearance were not one of his worries. The suit in which he went to see the governor was dusty and stood in need of a pressing. The hat was a battered, wide-brimmed slouch that he wore daily to work. So Isaac Perry, he just goes up and does his thing in the suit that he wears to work every day. He wasn't really too concerned about getting too fancy for the governor. And like I mentioned earlier, it's during the time that he spends here in the Capitol, which would be 16 years, that a lot can be learned about Isaac Perry. So Isaac Perry inherits the plans from all these previous architects for the Capitol building, and he's left to finish these plans and see them through, make changes where they needed to make changes. One of the most well-known pieces of the Capitol building that Isaac really had his hands in was the Great Western Staircase, which you can see some photos here. That's me in the middle from my tour on the staircase there. But to the left, you can see the beautiful stonework, beautiful carvings. There's a picture of Lincoln carved in the stonework there. Throughout the grand staircase, there are several different faces carved in the stonework. Some well-known, some nobody has any idea who they are. Isaac kind of gave the stoneworkers free rein to decorate and carve and do their thing here in the staircase. And so it's believed that some of the people that are not able to be identified may be family members or friends of some of the stone carvers. But there are, like I said, a few well-known. Daniel Dickinson is up there, lots of different ones. You really could spend a lot of time just looking at the beautiful details in the staircase. It goes like 4 stories, big skylight up above. It's just beautiful. To the left of the screen is Isaac Perry with his granddaughter Lucretia, little Lucretia. Little Lucretia and big Lucretia both have their likeness carved into some of the stonework in the Capitol. Let's see if I can zoom in here. I don't know if I can do without losing it, but yeah, that's what I thought. Let me see if I can move it up. See that little face right there? That's Lucretia. That's Lucretia's face carved into the column there. Right near that area too, there's a silhouette of Lucretia Perry as well, which unfortunately I don't have a picture of. I'll have to take one the next time I go back. So again, by this time, the Capitol building was, dragging on. There was, like I said, a lot of politics behind the building. There were occasional work stoppages where, they just had to wait to figure out when the legislature was going to approve whatever they were needing to approve to continue on with the work of the Capitol. So during this time, Isaac Perry, he earns the name the Commissioner of the Capitol, and he begins to work on other public buildings for the state as well. He designed several armories throughout New York State. He designed other asylums throughout the state. So that kind of kept him busy in between the work stoppages at the Capitol building. Aside from the Great Western Staircase, the other staircase, or the other part of the Capitol building that Isaac is responsible for is the Eastern Approach. This is a photo I took of the building back in October, but you can see the stairs there. It's like 70 steps. They don't even use those stairs. It's hard to see in the picture, but there's a barricade across the front to keep people off of them. It's just, I guess because it's a lot of steps, nobody really sees it as a a usable entrance at this point, but it's pretty remarkable structure. I found a couple of quotes that also give us a little background about Isaac. This one was from a newspaper also around 1887, and it was talking about Isaac Perry's office in the Capitol. It said that his office contained a gallery of prints. On the wall was prints of Trinity Church in Boston, the courthouse at Scranton, Philadelphia City Hall, and a building in Pittsburgh. On the other side of the wall was a group of Binghamton residences that Perry says were shadowless homes where daylight plays into every nook and corner long after the sun has set. So Isaac's office was a very, very small office, very plain, very kind of unassuming office. I found a couple other interesting things that people had said about Isaac. They said that Mr. Perry was tough and required much of his workers. Isaac Perry himself arrived at the Capitol early in the morning and stayed much later than everybody else. And oftentimes he was seen working right alongside the men doing all of this beautiful work in the Capitol building, which during that time, I guess, was kind of untraditional to have the architect working right alongside with the craftsmen. But he respected the trades, given his upbringing, and so he really kind of was all in. And like I mentioned earlier, Isaac Perry was a very quiet, unassuming man, but there was another quote that says, "When riled up, Mr. Perry could shout expletives that would make the average sailor feel like the proverbial 30 cents. But when the verbal storm was over, the kindly old man would put his hand in his pocket and give the object of his deserved wrath a generous piece of lucre," which I thought was interesting. So tough guy, he really wanted to see this building done, and he was dealing with a lot of the behind the scenes politics, and so he had a lot on his plate. It was also said that during the work stoppages, Mr. Perry was a very giving and generous man. Mr. Perry was a man of unbounded generosity. He could not refuse an appeal for aid. He never turned anyone away who came to him for relief, and oftentimes a score of persons awaited his arrival at his office in the Capitol to ask assistance of some nature. It is said that he gave away in charity over $100 per month during the time he spent in Albany. And that trend would continue throughout his life. Isaac Perry was always a very, very giving person. He did give away a lot of money throughout the years. Here at the Phelps Mansion, we're very lucky to have several different things related to Isaac, including this object here, which is Isaac Perry's wallet, or billfold. You can see his name there. Isaac, you can see again too, it's kind of a plain, nothing fancy, just a basic wallet. Also in our collection, we have a book from 1887. This is from the New York State Capitol building. And basically it's a guide to tell you where everything is in the Capitol, because the building was so big. It told you where people's offices were and where to find things. So this is a pretty neat piece to the museum's collection. We also have several personal letters from Isaac Perry and his granddaughter Lucretia. We have some deeds from property that Mr. Perry owned, including the Perry building downtown. One of these letters, this is a letter from little Lucretia. I'm not sure what the date is because there was no indication of date on this, but it says, "My dear Grandpa, I got a new doll, almost as big as I am. Mama sends you much love and hope, and hopes you are well. I think Jen is very cunning. I send love to you. How is Nellie? Is Nellie doing as she said she would? Good night, Lucretia." So I think that's kind of a cute little note or letter that was sent to Isaac during his time at the Capitol. Of course, Isaac Perry responds with a letter of his own, not a handwritten letter, but a typed up letter. And basically he writes, "Dear Lucretia, your very kind letter was handed me by Grandma upon her return from Binghamton. It was very nice and affectionate letter and pleased Grandpa very much. We have been very lonesome without you since you went to Binghamton, and I miss your presence very much, and especially in the evening when you and I used to have such a pleasant time. I have to say my prayers all alone now, as you well recollect when you were with us, we had prayers together and sometimes a nice chat until Grandma came in from the other room and ordered you to turn your face to the wall and go to sleep, which order you always obeyed. We are not having a first-rate time just now. Grandma has a sore throat but hopes to check it and avoid having the quinsy, which always causes her great suffering and makes her very sick. Cousin Nellie and Bertie are both very well and always glad to hear from you. I'm very much gratified to learn from your Mama that you had recovered from your cold and are now very well and in no doubt having a good time. I think of you a great deal, and it is quite hard for me to get along without my little sweetheart. Your good Auntie Harris has been very sick, but is somewhat better now, and Grandma has been to see her several times. Mrs. McGinty, I believe, is quite well. Catherine Cavert has a cold. Please write me another letter and let me know you are well and how you are getting along. I was in hopes to have gone home today, but have got a hard cold which will prevent my doing so. I am considerably better and thinking I will be all right by Monday morning. Give my love to Papa, Mama, Annie, and all other inquiring friends." And so that was a letter, it was 1896, so that probably would help put the timeline for little Lucretia's letter, probably around the same time period as well. So pretty, it just gives you a more personal connection, I think, when you can look back at the words coming directly from Isaac himself. So the Capitol drags on, and finally in 1899, the new governor, Teddy Roosevelt, calls it a day. He says basically the Capitol building is done. Even if it's not done, we have spent entirely too many years and too much money on this building. The Capitol building cost $25 to $27 million to build, which is said to be more expensive than the U.S. Capitol. And so when Roosevelt takes over as governor, he appoints, a new group of people to work at the Capitol building, and so basically Isaac Perry was out. So Isaac Perry returns to Binghamton. He basically pretty much retires, but does take on commission of designing new gates for Spring Forest Cemetery. Shortly upon their completion in 1904, Isaac passed away in his sleep on March 17th. And ironically enough, I'm sure some of you who are locals have heard this story before, but his funeral cortege was the first to go through the brand new gates at Spring Forest. We do have, also in our collection here at the museum, we have a large folder of obituary notices from March 17th and even a couple days after, showing just how well respected Isaac Perry was here in New York. There are obituary notices from almost every single newspaper in New York State talking about his life, his work, and pretty much his legacy. Like I mentioned earlier, Isaac Perry was a very giving man. When he died, it's said that the estate of Isaac Perry was worth anywhere between $100,000 and $115,000, and around $75,000 of that was property. The large notice that you see to the right is a notice of Isaac Perry's death, and that an inventory is going to be taken of the residence of Isaac Perry, and that occurred on June 27th, 1904. And this is also part of one of those papers that's in the museum's collection as well. So I do have a picture of Spring Forest Cemetery's gates. These are the gates that Isaac designed. Again, the last project that Isaac would work on. The Phelps Mausoleum is in Spring Forest Cemetery, and Isaac Perry's monument there as well. This is a picture of the Perry monument. It's hard to see, but that's his monument there in Spring Forest. And so that really brings us to the end. I just want to scroll back real quick, though, because I think there was some questions that I missed, and some people. Cherise says hello. Hello, Cherise. Karen asked how much Mr. Phelps paid to have the mansion. Karen, if you're still here with us, the mansion was, I guess, estimated to cost around $70,000 to build. But as we know now, the final cost was between $100,000 and $120,000, and that total might include removing 4 buildings that were once here on the site. There were smaller structures here when Mr. Phelps bought the lot, and so those were taken down so that the mansion could be built. So I think that's everybody. I think I got everybody else's questions. So again, I thank you guys for joining us. I know it's beautiful outside. It's supposed to be really nice today and tomorrow. So I hope you can try and get outside safely, and keep your distance, and enjoy the fresh air. Cemetery walks are always good. So if you want to go explore a cemetery, that's where I've been finding myself lately. It's pretty quiet there, and it's an area where you can definitely practice distancing, because it's a nice big cemetery, so there's lots of wide open spaces. Again, if you are there any books on Perry's life to purchase? No, unfortunately, not that I could find. The only information, like I said, was this nice book that was put together by a gentleman named Wesley Haynes, who had wrote a wonderful thesis about Isaac Perry, but it's out of print. So there really isn't. The only other book, like I said, that talks a little bit about Isaac, but also about the other people is, I don't know if you guys can see that, probably not, it's too dark in here. It's called The Capital Story by C.R. Roseberry. That has some information about Isaac Perry as well. Someone needs to write a book on Perry. Yeah, that would be awesome if someone could write a book on Perry. There's definitely some information there. But yeah, let's see what else we got. I think that's it. All right, guys. Well, again, we thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed these. If you are able to and would like to keep helping us out, we could definitely use some support through donations, or just sharing this message and letting other people know about the Phelps Mansion, so that they can join us for future talks. So, Andrea, the cemetery is the monument in the cemetery. When you drive through the gates, if you turn right at the first right that you can turn and follow the road up, go all the way up to about middle of the top of the hill up there, and you'll be parallel to Prospect Ave. The monument is up near there. So it's It's between two very large bushes, and so it's very hard to find. But if you got the general look of the monument there aren't too many that look like that, so it's usually pretty easy to pick out. Next week's topic, I believe, is Chelsea Gibson, our treasurer. She's going to be talking about a book here in the museum collection that pertains to Teddy Roosevelt. So we'll have more information about that coming out in the next couple days, so you guys could be on the lookout for that. Okay, thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Have a good day.